Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook on at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Hard II, and today I'm here with my friend Blake Allen, who is the former Assistant Finance Director for Kendra Horn's 2018 campaign, and also a not so well known yet promising establishment shill. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, Gregory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Um, First question I have here is, where are you from and where did you grow up at?
So I was technically born in Texas, down in Wichita Falls, but I lived most of my life south side Oklahoma City. So, I don't travel far, is what you can see from where I'm at now.
That's cool. And what helped form your politics over the years?
I think living in Oklahoma, as you may know, exposes you to more conservative viewpoints than I think people in other areas of the country may be used to. So the idea of politics that I think I take is get the wins that you can and build on them. And I think that idea, even though it might come across as like incrementalism to some, coming from where we come from, finding those victories and keeping those victories is may come across as moderate, but I think in Oklahoma it's very progressive. And I think
Yeah.
of getting victories where we can is kind of what my political philosophy is, and making Oklahoma progress as fast as we can when we can.
All right. All right. And how old are you again? You're not too much older than me, right?
26.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, he's like 26, right? Yeah.
The
So
political
you,
clock
so
is
you,
like 40-year-old.
yeah, so you were able to remember, you probably remember more so than I, Brad Henry being governor when we
Mm-hmm.
were kids. So yeah,
I
those were some
days.
good times.
The only
Yeah.
only governor who's ever possibly been won by cockfighting.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I invited you on to talk about some of the races going on here in Oklahoma and some of the politics here. So the first race, which probably the race you're probably most excited about, is the race here in Congressional District 5, which is Kendra Horn and soon to be one of either Stephanie Bice or Terry Neese. So, what are your thoughts on that race, and how do you think the outcome is going to be? Tell me about what you think.
Well, I mean, call me a hack, but I think Kendra's going to win in November. But a little, uh, but I think before jump straight into like what it looks like in November, I think we probably need to look at the runoff that's happening right now. And if you had to ask me if I was a betting man who I'd be putting money on to come ahead, I would say Terry Neese. She has more money. She's up on TV. She has, and since June, the super PAC for the group Club for Growth has spent $850,000 against Vice, and Terry Neese also has the endorsement of David Hill, the guy who finished in third. So I think it's gonna end up being Terry Neese who Kendra's gonna be, Representative Horn's gonna be going up against this November, and both Bice and Neese have pluses and minuses to what they can bring to the table. But I think it's going to be a very well-run race by Kendra.
Okay, so in the Republican primary, there was how many candidates? 5, 6, something like that.
God, there were so many. There may have been 9, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
including
Um.
Sherry Landon, the greatest campaign video Oklahoma has ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember a year ago, maybe it wasn't exactly a year ago, it was about a year ago. I was thinking that Bice was probably going to be the one to beat. And I mean, that's kind of eroded away now. Because I think who was it that ended up having the most votes the primary day? Was it
So
Nice?
yeah, so Nice ended up getting 36% of the vote, and Bice ended up only getting just over 25%.
Yeah, like when I saw that, I was like, "Eesh, it's not looking good for Miss uh she's a state senator, right? Bias, yeah. But yeah, I wasn't as interested in that race because I was thinking the best candidate that could go up against Representative Horn would be Bice. I wasn't sure if she would actually be able to win though, but I think that she would have been the best candidate to go up against Kendra. Didn't you? Do you agree with that?
I thought she was the best placed going forward, but she's just run a terrible campaign. Whenever the run or when the primary ended, she only had $80,000 cash on hand, which,
Wow.
as you know, is nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And
pretty crazy.
yeah, she spent $1 million for the primary, and it got her a quarter of the vote and in second place.
So what's up with that? Like, that's so shocking to me because I didn't even know who Terry Nice was until like this year. So like, what's the deal with Terry Nice? Why are people gravitating towards her?
Well, both Bice and Nice are essentially running as close to Trump as possible. I think Terry Nice is honestly closer to Trump in some ways than Bice is, but not just rhetoric wise, because I think rhetoric wise they're about the same. Position wise, they're roughly the same. But Nice was on Trump's Small Business Council during the 2016 race. I think, if I remember correctly, she stayed advising him up until like 2017. So they there are deeper connections on that end. And for whatever reason, especially rural voters don't seem to trust Bice very much. I mean, she came in third in Seminole County, and she almost came in third in Pot County. And,
Wow.
and while those two counties only account for, I believe, 12% of the vote or 12% of the population in the
Yeah.
fifth, in Oklahoma Republican primaries and especially Oklahoma Republican runoffs, rural areas play an outsized role. And I think that's hurting her as well, as rural people, to be quite frank, just don't trust her. And
Yeah.
I don't have I don't have all the insights as to why that is, but they just don't seem to.
Hmm. I kind of figured that would probably be it because I was thinking like last year I was like, well, with Bice being from Oklahoma County, that's probably going to hurt her in everywhere else because I think she's from like a somewhat urban suburban district, no, like Edmond area.
So she represents like Piedmont down into West Edmond.
Yeah, yeah. Like I figured that would probably end up hurting her in certain areas, like Shawnee and out here. Like, I mean, personally, I don't know anyone who voted for her or for Nice in the primary. I know someone who voted for Bice here in Shawnee, but I thought that would have probably been her biggest challenge was getting past the primary, being a suburban Republican trying to win in a rural area in the primary. Um, but yeah,
And the thing
so
is, her
yeah,
state district, it doesn't really cover a whole lot of the fifth.
yeah,
Only 13 precincts of it are actually in Oklahoma County. So she doesn't have a very big base to begin with in the county. So people might just kind of know her name. So her name ID just wouldn't be very high. And with
yeah.
all the that Niece has been running, although to be fair, her ads look like they probably should be for somebody running for Frank Lucas's seat, but it gets her name out there. And I think that took away any advantage that area Bice had.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, do you think, in the general, how much do you think Representative Horn will improve in terms of um, like percentage wise than she did in 2018? Like, how much more percentage do you think she's going to get this time around?
So last time around, she got a little over 50%. Like it was a 1.8% win. Um, I think there's a very real possibility because there has been some internals floating around, uh, the veracity of which, I mean, I've seen one of them, but I can't speak to it more than that, of Biden winning the fifth by the one I saw was 5%. I think that there's a real possibility that Kendra could match that total. Um, she's she fits the district very well on like a partisan level. Very moderate dim, and I think that's where the fifth is. And I think that plus her money, her money fundraising is very good. I think there's a real possibility she can win by up to 5-6%. And I mean, that's kind of where I'd say that would be a very good night for her.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking maybe around plus. I was thinking more plus 2 or 3%,
Well,
but
that's what
I've
I'm saying.
seen those.
If
Yeah,
Biden polls are end up being accurate. If
yeah,
not, and it ends up being more what I feel Biden's probably going to end up at, which is at best +1 or +2 in the district. I think that Kendra could probably beat Biden's top
yeah,
line. She could hit like a +3. But like I said, if Biden's winning by +5 or +6 in the district, which you and I both feel would be insane because we live here,
yeah.
uh, and we would never in our wildest imagination. Uh, I think she could match that total, but that's very top line driven. If it's not top line driven, I think a 3-point win is probably a very nice night for her.
Yeah, because I was pretty shocked when she won in 2018. Like that was huge. Like
I was
that was
very.
yeah. I mean like you took part in that victory, kind of firsthand because you worked on her campaign. But that was a huge deal. Like I was like, whoa, like things are changing here in the state now. Like that was yeah.
Democrats in Oklahoma for having her win. It's just, it sent everybody sky high.
Yeah. But yeah, so the other thing I have to talk here is State Question 802. Now, how do you feel about the passage of that, and how do you feel about the margin of how much it passed by?
Well, the margin gave me a heart attack, but thankfully, because we passed it, if I was in a rural area, the hospital would still be open to help me out with that heart attack.
Yeah.
So, and there is one thing that and you and I had kind of offlined about this whenever it was going on, was the fact that I think people need to realize that even though it is true that especially Oklahoma County helped power that through, even though it did lose in rural areas, it didn't lose by as much as you would think other Democrat leaning uh, ballot questions would go in Oklahoma's rural areas. And I think that's important to realize that there are people out there, just not just in urban suburban areas, that were wanting to pass that. And I think people lose track of that sometimes, that if those areas voted like they normally vote in a Republican, for Republicans in a general, then it wouldn't have passed at all.
Yeah.
But the but tying it back to our previous question about how important I think that is, the fact that it passed in Oklahoma County by, I believe, I think it got 70% of the vote in Oklahoma County, and in the 5th district it got 64% of the vote, is a very good sign going forward. I Just for that race in particular, but I'm very excited that it passed, and I'm also looking forward to state question 805 come November. Oklahomans have done very, very good on passing good, strong, progressive uh, ballot questions in the past 5 years, and I think we're going to continue that streak on 805.
Yeah, I think so too. I remember some people were saying that the map and the results for 802 is something to look at and compare to what a future Democratic gubernatorial candidate should be doing or looking at within the next 2 years. I guess is when the next race is. Do you think that that is a appropriate thing to think about? Like, do you think that the results for 802 could look like a could is a possibility for a Democratic win? What a Democratic win would look like in 2022
I think
against Kevin Stitt? Yeah,
I
what do you
that
think?
I think that gives us a preview of a possible route forward. I'm still a little hesitant to think that that would be the exact map, but I think it gives us a broad outlines. It would be Democrat strength in Tulsa County, Oklahoma County, uh, Comanche, and out in
Cleveland County.
and
Yeah.
competing in those areas. It's very similar to what Republicans did whenever they were able to take over the state in the 80s to 90s. It would, I think that's kind of what a Democrat map would look like if we were looking at flipping the state. And plus, with the
Yeah.
metro bigger than they were back then, it gives Democrats a stronger hand going forward.
Yeah. Um Yeah, because whenever I hear people talking about that, I'm like, I guess it kind of maybe gives us an idea of what that could look like or what we could work on, even though it's kind of like a one issue thing. But, because like to me, like I would add, all right, sometimes I'd like to add Pot County or at least Shawnee, House District 26 area, into the areas that could be blue soon. But 802 failed in Pot County,
Yeah,
like bad. And I mean, not bad, but like, it failed. And I was pretty disappointed to see that. And whenever I hear people saying, like, oh, well, this map is a way to look at what a possible Democratic victory could look at, I don't see it as a 1-to-1 because, it's
yeah.
kind of that one issue. But I can see in some ways why people would say that.
That's why I try to like specify like it as like a broad outline. I think a dim win is going to focus a lot more, because even though the largest vote areas for 802 was in urban suburban areas, also the most votes against 802 were also urban suburban areas, just
Yeah.
population reasons and stuff like that. So I think Dems would have to figure out a way to increase their vote share in those areas. And if the national realignment keeps happening and if it finally hits South Tulsa and the Tulsa suburbs, I think that's your route forward. But those Tulsa suburbs are a very tough nut to crack.
Yeah. Yeah, because I also think it's it was I remember someone put up a map about the class and income divides too.
Mm-hmm.
So like that was the way that I chose to look at it was when people were like, oh, well, the rural areas voted against it. It was like, yeah, but like the more poor people in those areas voted in favor of it, and that's also kind of how it goes whenever it comes to races against Democrats and Republicans, where the lower income people tend to vote for the Democrats, and it's about the turnout of those people. And I think it even goes that way with some of the suburbs. especially in the Tulsa areas and stuff like that, and Jinx and Broken Arrow and whatnot. Because the areas that I've been looking at, paying more closely attention to flip, more or less around Oklahoma City, like Edmonds and more areas. I think they're more likely to flip in the next couple of elections than, areas around Tulsa or even South Tulsa itself.
And Tulsa has some underlying racial polarization
Yeah,
that
that too. Yeah.
Oklahoma County just doesn't have, or at least not to the same
Not
extent.
to the same degree, yeah.
Now, you can see more, especially the north side on these ballot measures, is just starting to move. I mean, there's still some areas of Oklahoma City, like West Oklahoma City and especially Southwest Oklahoma City, are going to take a while. But more is starting to move. So you can see, like I said, broad outlines. 22 with Stitt being himself. I mean, if we are going to broach a little bit of the subject on 22 in the governor's race, future casting a little bit, he's made enough enemies to where it will be an interesting race for Democrats if the environment is right.
Yeah.
And of course, that's assuming he beats back what's looking to be a primary challenge from State Superintendent Joy Hoffmeister, which will be, I love Republican primaries. It'll be very interesting going forward, and I think that 802 map, more so than even the medical marijuana map, is probably a route forward for Democrats to at least start thinking about what they want to start targeting. I hope in the future for down ballot races, Democrats do a little bit of a better job candidate recruitment in Oklahoma County and Tulsa County. We did. I mean, I like our candidates that we have this cycle, but there were some pretty key district misses, and I think a good result on 802, a good result on 805, a good result for Kendra, and a good result up in the first. And a good result in the first is different than a good result here in the fifth, but I think that will encourage more people in 22 to run.
Yeah. Yep. And what's the other thing I was gonna say? But no, I didn't have it on here, but I wanted to talk about the idea of Superintendent Joy Hoffmeister primarying Kevin Stitt in 2022. So what do you think that would look like? Like how do you think, or do you think that she could actually beat him? I personally think she would crush him. What do you think?
I would not say that she would crush him. I wouldn't go that far. I think she would have a very good chance of beating him, but it's always hard to beat an incumbent in a primary, regardless. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's still ridden, it's usually pretty difficult. And our good friend Kevin Stitt is somewhat scandal ridden. But I think she has some key strengths that a normal primary challenger wouldn't. She has basically every single teacher in Oklahoma loves her from the walkout a few years ago. She is your definition of a country club Republican insofar as she doesn't really press social issues too hard, but and I think regardless of party, most people agree she's done a pretty good job as state superintendent. To be fair, she was following up Janet Barisi, so it's not that hard to look better than her.
Yeah.
But, and then there is, and I think this is one of the biggest issues that helps her, is the amount, how much of an enemy Kevin Stitt has made the tribes. The tribes do not like him, clearly. Many of the people, both in the GOP party infrastructure itself, as well as elected officials, don't like him either. So there's money there for her, there's endorsements there for her, and she already has a very nicely built suburban base. So I think she has all the right elements to be able to compete and beat him, but it's just a question of if.
Yeah. I agree. And then if she were to beat him in a primary, she would wipe the floor pretty much with any Democrat we nominate, correct?
I mean, she would be the strongest Republican nominee for governor in
In
probably,
Oklahoma
yeah,
history.
probably Oklahoma history. Maybe Frank Keating may have been the only one who could compete with her on that level, because I mean, she has the profile and the connections to be able to hold back Democrat gains in the suburbs, and she would have the rural vote probably completely locked down to begin with. Uh, so it'd be very hard to beat her. Is the
Yeah,
say that, especially if it's a Biden midterm.
yeah. Yeah, like, because I know people who usually would vote Democrat, but because they like her, they'd probably vote for her over any Democrat.
Which
Like,
ironically, I mean that the primary would be harder for her to win if Democrats win.
exactly. Yeah, like
Like John
it's
Kasich scenario. Some Democrats are like, I like him. I was like, that's proof enough that he's probably not going to make it out of that primary.
yeah, like, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to see because honestly, like I have Republican friends. I have friends, people who I know who voted for Kevin Stitt, and Republican friends who didn't vote for him in the general 2 years ago, who all hate him, and like they're tired of him and what he's been doing the last couple of years, especially with how he's handled the pandemic or how he
Yeah,
hasn't handled the pandemic, I guess.
that's
It's just a joke. Yeah.
it's,
Like it's terrible. And then he actually got the coronavirus himself and was the first governor to do so. And, keeping us in the top 10, of course, like he wants to.
oh man.
Yeah, and what was it? Did you see the other day he went to that school? I want to say it was Hennessy, and he was without a mask. He didn't wear a mask, and he was just talking to kids, going to classrooms. Like it was just like the most insane thing.
Oh
Like,
yeah, and the argument that he already had COVID, so he doesn't need a mask.
yeah, like that.
Yeah,
He's so.
I
Oh
mean,
wow.
he doesn't really believe in vaccines, so
Yeah,
masks. I mean, it's not that much of a jump.
yeah. Like it's very on brand for him. It's oh wow. But yeah, but do you think that that we could say that he's a worse governor than Mary Fallon already, or should we give it more time?
We need to give him more time. That's a big hill to climb. I mean, it's super hard to have 12% approval ratings. Like, it's impressive that she got 12% approval ratings. So he's not anywhere near that. So I can't say he's worse, but he's giving it the little college try, and I respect that.
Yeah, like it's pretty insane. So what are some other races that you have been looking at? I know you told me you were looking at, I want to say it was House District 4 up in Tahlequah. And so yeah, what are some other races you've been looking at here in
So
Oklahoma?
six down in Chickasha, David Perriman's district. I think that's going to be a pretty interesting one to look at. Um, HD24, it's an urban district. Once again, somewhere the Democrats should be competing, should be winning. It's an open seat, which helps. Um,
House District 24, where's that at?
also,
Okay, yeah.
um, so there's small individual races out there. I think some people are maybe a little too bullish at the moment on Dem seats, but if that 5-point Biden lead in the fifth is accurate, I think it opens up certain seats that might not have at first blush looked competitive. Like we have Greg Treat's district out in West Oklahoma City. I think that is, especially the north side of his district, has been shifting towards Democrats because that's where you start bleeding into like Kerry Hicks, Julia Kurtz kind of area. And those areas obviously have been, they flipped, so they've been going blue. So
Yeah.
I think the north side Oklahoma City races are going to be something to watch for. Tulsa's got a couple that are interesting but more fringe. But I think a lot of what I'm personally interested in is seeing if Representative Meredith can keep his seat. And then Democrats have a very good candidate out in Perrimans and 56 on Chickasha. So I think that's a possible keep, especially in the current environment. So we might we might actually see Democrats actually net gain seats this cycle. And as you and I know, that's a sentence you don't use a whole lot.
Yeah, that's a sentence we haven't used in what? At least a decade, 2 decades almost? I don't know. Something like that.
I think it's either 98 or 2000 was the last time.
Yeah, like it's been
Maybe, but yeah, it's been
since the 90s or so.
After I was born.
Yeah, like because I remember I was looking at that some months ago. I was like, when was the last time Democrats actually gained seats? Have we just been perpetually losing seats my entire life? And I was like, yeah, we pretty much have.
Oh, bleeding
Yeah.
seats. And I wrote a little thing about this, and it was talking about the thing that was really the death knell for the Oklahoma Democratic Party was the passage of term limits for the state. It absolutely destroyed all of the older dams we had in Little Dixie, and yeah, that was kind of the beginning of the end for a large rural portion of the state party.
Yeah, and what year was that the state limit that the term limits took into effect?
It was 96.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's I remember my mom, that's what she said to me some years ago. She was like, no, the term limits are the worst thing that ever happened to this state. No, I say no on term limits. I was like, okay. And then I was like, why? And she was like, because like the state used to be run by Democrats, and a lot of those Democrats just termed out and they got replaced by Republicans. And if they were able to just keep their seats, then it would have been different. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right.
It's amazing to think the amount of Democrat power that used to be in rural Oklahoma.
Oh yeah.
We had a U.S. House Speaker come out of Southeast Oklahoma, and Carl Albert. It's just wild to think about where the state was and where it is now.
Yeah, like Fred Harris was considered to be one of the most liberal senators of all time in this country. Who else is there? Like if you see something I realized this when I was in high school. If you see something that's named after someone, named after a person, it's probably a Democrat.
Yeah.
You have Will Rogers Airport. You have the West Watkins Reservoir, which he was a Democrat, then he switched to be a Republican. You have something that's named after Tom Steed around Shawnee. I can't remember what it was, but he was from Shawnee. He was a congressman. He was from Shawnee. Represented 4th District, I believe, for like 20 years. Like, a lot of things around here were named after Democrats. I'm sure I only named like a handful of things. I'm sure there's way more things in Little Dixie that are named after Democrats that I don't even know about.
And then you have like state universities named after them.
Yeah.
Like you have Murray State, although Alfalfa Bill Murray is not somebody we should brag about too much.
Yeah.
But we also have like Carl Albert down out in Podo. Like that's another state university named after a Democrat. It's wild the shift, really, if you just look at historically. And like even Oklahoma used to have like the largest or second largest socialist party in the entire U.S. Like,
yeah,
Oklahoma's populist streak is weird.
Yeah, like now it mostly just exists when it comes to our ballot initiatives, which I always try to connect that with the populist streak that we have, our history here. But like yeah, like it's pretty crazy whenever I start looking back at stuff and I'm like, oh, look at that. Like I always think about what is it? Um what's his name? Inhofe. He was in the state legislature in like the 70s, I think.
Mm.
And I was thinking to myself, I always think about that. I'm like, did he really imagine that like one day his party would be like running things into the ground? Did he ever imagine he would be able to win a statewide election?
Yeah,
Like,
his
like
first
that,
state election that he ran in, he lost by like 20 points, and
yeah,
that was during L, was it LBJ's election, I think, or the one right after
64,
that. Mm-hmm.
68, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like it's a pretty crazy stuff to think about. Like, and it almost feels like it was like as a kid, I didn't really notice it too much because, like, I was a kid. I just knew Brett Henry, and I knew my state senator at the time was a Democrat. What's his name? Charlie Laster, and I knew that much. And then when I got older, started looking back at some of this other stuff, I was like, oh, so like when I was born, I was represented pretty much by Democrats up and down the board, except for what's his name, J.C. Watts was my congressman at the
yeah.
time. So yeah, like it's pretty interesting. Oklahoma's interesting history. Um, so what do you think is going to happen in the presidential election? Who do you think is going to win? Not just here in Oklahoma, but like in general.
Well, here in Oklahoma, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know get that answer, but duh. But I mean, I will say this: Biden will. I think I'm pretty confident on this, and it'll probably come back to bite me. But I'm pretty confident. I think Biden will be the first Democrat to win a county in Oklahoma since Al Gore. Um, I just think he's going to win Oklahoma County. I don't know by how much,
Yeah.
which is just big for the state because we've been the only state this century that's never had a, uh, well, excluding the year 2000,
Yeah.
uh, we've never had a single county go blue, which is just crazy that we're the only state that managed that.
Yeah.
But I think Biden's going to win. I mean, at this point, I just don't see a way that he doesn't at least very successfully carry the popular vote. I mean, it helps that a Republican hasn't won the popular vote but once in the past 30 years, so that kind of helps the argument there. But just his strength in areas like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, eh, he's the type of person who can bring old white working class union voters in the Rust Belt and Midwest back into the fold. I think I've said he unabashedly leans into his everyone's grandpa energy because I mean let's face it, that man uses the word malarkey. And I think the question is going to be is what flips that we're thinking is more of a reach. Like I think North Carolina is going to flip. Georgia, I don't know, but the fact that I get to say I don't know on Georgia is kind of neat. Same thing with Texas. I don't think Texas is a toss up. I think it's lean R. But the fact that Texas is lean R in my head is still kind of crazy. I mean, Democrats might win the Texas House for the first time since the 90s.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy, and it's a perfect year to do it too for redistricting. Um, but I think Biden wins the presidency. I things it's still early. You know the traditional wait until Labor Day to actually see what the landscape looks like. We're not at Labor Day yet, but if you told me if the election was held today, Biden he just absolutely romps to the presidency, and it won't matter who his vice president is.
Yeah.
They keep teasing us about
I
it.
know, right? Yeah, I think I mean, I hope Biden wins, and from the looks of the polls, it looks like he's going to win. I mean, and it's not the same as 2016. I hate it when people say like, "Oh, but the polls in 2016." The polls in 2016 were a little bit different, a lot more closer. It was more within the margin of error, but in Hillary's favor, not so much. what is he leading by in Pennsylvania? Like almost 10 points or something.
Yeah,
Like these are some pretty like steep margins here we're talking about. They're not 2 or 3 points. I mean, in some of the more toss-up swing states, it's like he's leading by 2 or 3 points. So you can kind of take those with a grain of salt. But it's still a possibility. Like I think Arizona will probably be blue.
yeah, I agree.
I think um, I think Florida would probably be blue. Georgia, it maybe.
Yeah, you and I were
I
both like
think
maybe, but
yeah,
that's weird to even be at that point. I mean, I
yeah,
know Obama got close, but it was like that was a different time, different sorts of turnouts.
yeah. Because I think with Georgia, and it's probably this way with some other states too. The only thing that's keeping it from being blue is voter suppression. Like that's my thoughts on Georgia is voter suppression and the dirty tactics that the Republicans use in order to kick people off the rolls and stuff before election day. Like I think that's the only thing keeping Georgia from being blue. And you know, that's still going to be an issue in several states actually, not just Georgia, but I think Georgia's one of the worst places where that's a thing where that keeps happening. I mean, Stacey Abrams was kept from being governor because of voter suppression. So, and then Texas is interesting. I've been trying to keep up with that a little bit. Um, I think it could go blue, but maybe not. Who knows?
I
And
really want polling on some of those Texas suburban seats to give me an idea of what it looks like. Like one that I would tell you and your listeners to keep an eye on is Texas's third district, Van Jones. It's in the Plano, Collin County area. It is a seat that Trump won by. He won pretty handedly, but Beto did very well in there in 2018, and uh, Jones is a very credible candidate, and I know a little bit more about that because I have family that lives in Plano. So anecdotally,
mhm.
anec-
No, it's like a little bug. Sorry, it's
no,
fine.
you're so anecdotally, it's one that I was keeping an eye on, anyways, just because of family. But it to see how far Trump's fallen in the suburbs is if he falls in a place as Republican and wealthy as Plano, Collin County, then he's in trouble. Is
Yeah,
basically the flag I'm throwing up on that.
yeah. Like, um, that was another state I was thinking about. I want to say, what is the polls looking like in South Carolina? I know Jamie Harrison might end up beating Lindsey Graham. They're neck and neck last time I saw.
Yeah, so I always feel like South Carolina is like one of those states that in a Democrat wave year is kind of like Lucy and Peanuts with a football. Democrats can see it, they know it's there, but it's always just out of reach. And I think a big reason for that is South Carolina is very inelastic as a state. It has pretty strong. It has some pretty strong racial polarization in its voting. Um, I think Jamie Harris is. I know that a lot of people's favorite candidates out there are, like Mark Kelly in Arizona and stuff like that. I love what Jamie Harrison's doing. I love the fact that he's teamed up with Cal Cunningham in North Carolina and John Ossoff in Georgia and his joint fundraising. And it's just getting over that 46, 47% hump is just so hard for any South Carolina Democrat. He's got a chance. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't. And I think if there is a candidate that could, it looks like it could be him. I wouldn't be surprised to even see him get up to 48, 49 on like the craziest of nights. So it's not impossible to hit that 50%. It's just, it's going to be a fight to hit that 50% just because of the aforementioned reasons. And plus, Lindsey Graham's not asleep at the wheel. He's spending money, he's raising money, he's actually running
Yeah.
as a walking through the race like a couple other Republicans, like what's her face? Ernst up in Iowa.
And she could lose her seat too.
She is running a terrible campaign.
I think she's probably going to lose. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. She is sleepwalking through that race, and sleepwalking through Iowa in a wave year is dumb. But like, I'm not gonna stop her.
Yeah, like another race that I've been looking at is the Montana Senate race.
Bullock and Daines, yeah.
Yeah, I think Bullock's gonna win. What do you think?
It's so I think it's going to be a toss up come election night. Bullock is the type of candidate who can make, because Montana loves themselves some uh, libertarian leaning Dems. That's what they have in John Tester. That's what they have
Yeah,
in Bullock. Uh, Bullock is raising a ton of money. Montana is not that expensive, and he has enough money to basically send absentee ballots to every single person in Montana several times over at this point. Uh, he has very good connections with the native tribes there, which are important for Democrats. I think it's gonna. I think it's gonna stay a toss-up. I don't think I'd move it past leaning just because it's still Montana. It's still a Republican-leaning state. Um, but I think he has a very real chance. Alaska, I find interesting just on a personal level.
mm-hmm.
Other than the fact that since you and I interact a bit with a group on Twitter that your listeners may be aware of called Election Twitter, that poll that we all, the fundraising for that we had done, and I think Al Gross is a good candidate. I mean, that would be like a shocker, but like, if I'm shocked about Alaska, it's a good night.
Yeah.
But no. I mean, there's a lot of races out there. I think the Democrats, I would honestly put them at the favorites to flip the Senate this year.
That's a good thing to hear.
I
Have controlled the Senate in what feels like a lifetime,
yeah,
but what was it, 2012, I think was the last time? Or is it 2014? 2014 was where we lost it, right?
2014
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And then, the Kavanaugh vote made our life just that much harder in the Senate in
Yeah.
2016, which, I mean, that's for a host of different reasons, but, we lost some seats probably because of that. So it made, our job just a little bit harder. I miss Claire McCaskill a lot. And I like Heitkamp too, but I think we're the slight favorites to flip the Senate. I wouldn't be surprised if Democrats in the House actually grow our House majority.
Yeah, that's definitely going to happen too.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there are some people who are talking about like up to like 10 to 12 seats. I would probably say it's probably going to be
Five
more
or six.
5 or 6 seat game, but I mean, building your House majority the cycle after you massively flipped it kind of reminds me of 2006, 2008. Democrats made really big gains in a midterm and then doubled up on them on the presidential election. And I think 2020 could be shaping up to be that sort of event. But
Yeah.
the Democratic caucus this time is going to be much, much more ideologically consistent than the old one that was so heavily reliant on rural Southern Dems.
Yeah, like I keep telling people, like the party itself, I follow mostly a lot of leftists on Twitter who complain about a lot of them. I'm not gonna say all of them. They complain about the Democratic Party all the time, as if it can never change or anything. And I'm like, it's definitely changed in our lifetimes. Like in the last 10 years or so, like the Blue Dogs of 10 years ago are not the same as the Blue Dogs of today.
No,
Like,
the fact that Kendra is, depending on where you look, the second or third most moderate member of the House. I mean, that should tell
that's
you
a huge improvement from 10 years ago.
yeah, you know, a pro
Like
gay
mm-hmm.
person being a blue dog in the House is
That's
so much
huge.
than what would have been in 2006.
Yeah, like, because I always compare her to, like, I tell people, I'm like, compare her to Dan Boren. Like, sure, Dan Boren was from, like, a really rural district, but regardless, like, he was a Blue Dog Democrat. She's also a Blue Dog Democrat. But, like, he voted against Obamacare, for the repeal of Obamacare, to defund Planned Parenthood. Like, that was a Blue Dog Democrat 10 years ago. But she would not do either one of those things. In fact, ran against Steve Russell because he voted to repeal Obamacare. Like, that's drastic difference. Like, it
And
might not be perfect, but yeah.
that's on the, I'm going to air quote this real quick because I don't really agree with the terminology, but that's on the centrist end of the caucus. Like, that's a big shift from like you said, Dan Boren. Like,
Yeah.
I would drive that through to people and be like, you don't understand like where we were at and where we're at now. It's very different.
Yeah,
And,
like,
yeah, go on.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, but like even in terms of like the different caucuses in the House, like the Progressive Caucus itself has grown a lot over the last 10 years, or it shrank a little bit in 2010, 2012, but like it's grown a lot. Like it's 95 members now, 96 members.
Yeah,
And then the Blue Dog Caucus was at one point like what, 40 members, and now it's like 20 something, I think,
yeah, it was
right?
40, and then after 2012, it was at 8.
Yeah, and now
Now,
it's like about 20, right?
yeah, it's yeah, and but once again, like we said, those new 17 new members, they are not like the 17 members who were lost. They're much,
Exactly.
much different. They're much more socially progressive. Now, people can have their disagreements with them on, fiscal policy and, governmental spending. Like, and I understand there are ideological differences there, but even these blue dogs are like, hey, we want to keep and make Obamacare better. Like
Yeah.
that's big compared to the blue dogs who voted against it.
And voted to repeal it. Like
Yeah,
that's a big difference. Like I remember this Twitter drama that like someone on Twitter was like, Obamacare is killing people. I'm like, no, it's not. That's misleading. It might not be doing enough to insure people, but if you are saying it's killing people, you're implying that it should be repealed because it's doing more harm than good. So like and then they accuse me of being semantical. I'm like, that's not semantics. Like you're just being misleading. So yeah, like I try to explain that to people, and sometimes they don't want to listen to it. I'm like, but like, come on, like the caucus itself is a lot different than it was. The party itself is a lot different than what it was 10 years ago, or even 5 or 6 years ago, prior to 2016. Like, I can see it.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and I will always, I mean, I respect for some people change isn't fast enough, and I understand that some people's ideological bent on it. But as I'm always sitting here, the pragmatic, get what you can now and then build on it for later. And I think that the way the caucus is constructed now, if the Dems get a federal trifecta November, people are going to be astonished at what we can do for 2 years until that next cycle comes up. It's going to be a hard cycle if Biden wins, but people are going to, I mean, we're going to be able to do things. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I really am. It's gonna be better than 20. It's gonna be better than 2009, I'm sure. I mean, aside from there actually being a literal pandemic going on,
Well,
but
yeah.
that's another thing. But yeah, so last question I have here is, what kind of music do you listen to?
uh, it depends on my mood. It wouldn't be surprising to hear me listening to lo-fi 1 minute and then deciding to go back into my high school days, listening to bands like Asking Alexandria, Parkway Drive. And then the next minute just listening to rap. It's awful. I tell people it's because I have a very wide base, but it's because apparently I guess I base my music on my moods, or if I'm studying. But yeah,
Yeah. Were you ever into Bring Me the Horizon?
absolutely.
Okay.
Several occasions, Warp Tour twice. It's good stuff. Uh, Getting in the pit and Warp Tour it's I haven't done it. I haven't been to Warp Tour in probably a decade at this point, but I can still remember just guys triple my size just uh, oh no, but yeah, it was good times. Just really
Yeah, what other bands were around back then or still around? Some of them are still around.
Date was another big one.
Say what?
A Day to Remember.
Yeah. Day to Remember. Because I never see like these were the bands that were also popular whenever I was in high school too. But I never really got into them. I was in the new metal, so like I listened to like Korn and Limp Bizkit and Linkin Park and Slipknot all the time. But all the other kids around me were like, "Oh, Bring Me the Horizon, Asking Alexandria," and I don't know if you remember these
Dark Wave.
guys.
Dark Wave.
Yeah, do you remember Sleeping with Sirens and Pierce the
Mm-hmm.
Veil? Yeah,
Yeah.
like I never got into those bands either. Like I've recently revisited some of those bands and kind of like them. Like what's the one A Day to Remember song? It's um the one where they say disrespect your surroundings. It's
I.
from
It's on their homesick. It's from their
yes,
homesick.
it's from that album, but I can't. I can never remember the name because it's like a long name. Because this was the era where bands had like really long, weird, obscure names for their song
Yeah, like
titles.
there was one on the homesick album was I'm made of wax, Larry. What are you made of?
Wow. Let me find it. Hold on.
But I do notice the older I get, the more I kind of like the softer songs that they put out. Like I was going back and listening to it, and like "Have Faith in Me" is a fantastic song. But I've also noticed that my dad's music choices have affected me a lot because I've been listening to like a lot of Styx and Kansas and Tears for Fear for some reason recently, and my dad's very proud of himself for affecting me like that.
The song I was thinking of is Mr. Highway's "Thinking About."
Yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah,
talking about?
I,
That about yeah, that song. I say recently, it was some months ago. I discovered it because it was on TikTok and people were using it. Instead of saying disrespect your surroundings, they're saying disinfect your surroundings because this is the beginning of the pandemic. But yeah, like I discovered some of those songs through TikTok and got into them and was like, okay, like I remember these bands, but I wasn't really into them, but I like these couple of songs.
well, it's nice to hear
And
that metalcore is gaining fans again.
well, no, I mean, like metalcore's never lost fans. I mean, like it's kind of like I'd say this all the time that it's kind of like an overplayed, overdone genre at this point because now it's we have a lot of metalcore bands that do new metal now. So like you have new metalcore. So you have bands like Issues and I Prevail and stuff like that. I don't know if you remember these guys, but there's a band called A Mirror.
Yes, I've seen it a couple of times live.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, so I had Frankie Palmieri, their singer, on my show a while ago.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like I got into Amira when I was in high school, and they're like new metalcore and Attila.
Mm.
And so like you have bands like that now that exist, and they're like metalcore, but they're also new metal. So that's like the new thing that's been going on. And but there's also like metalcore bands that just kind of do regular metalcore stuff, and it's just kind of like, come on, guys, like switch it up a little bit.
I
But
think there's and then there's some of the old metalcore guys who just destroyed their vocal cords on doing screams. So now that's why you have Ask Alexander doing more of like your traditional, almost like rock and roll style music and stuff like that, because that is just so rough on your throat.
Yeah, like, and for me, like with Asking Alexandria, I like the first song I ever really liked by them was Moving On, and that was like whenever they kind of started to move away from metalcore.
Hmm.
And that was like their biggest song at the time. I think that's still probably like their biggest song. Either that or like Antisocial, which is their one of their newer songs. Like, yeah, and then Bring Me the Horizon. I liked Bring Me the Horizon on the Sepulturnal album. I like some of those songs. And then I liked some of the songs on their other two albums after that. I didn't like the ones on their first couple of albums.
I always joke that my kind of like gateway drug into metalcore was the two bands were Breaking Benjamin and A Day to Remember. So it was like, because those are like whenever you're moving in from I think like not metal music, those are like super easy like entry bands into it, just because they aren't as hard and they have a lot more cleans in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was like my sixth, seventh grade was Breaking Benjamin and and A Day to Remember, and nice
Yeah.
that they're still around.
Yeah, Breaking Benjamin's another one I'm really into as well, and 3 Days Grace and Chevelle and stuff like that. Like I never like when I was in high school, the heaviest thing I listened to like regularly was probably Slipknot and like a Mirror, and then I guess Korn would be after that. But like most of the stuff I listened to was more milder, like Limp Bizkit or Linkin Park and Chevelle. But I got into a lot more heavier stuff as I got older, like into college, and that's always interesting. I say that that's how my music taste matured. Like I started with Limp Bizkit, and then in Linkin Park and stuff, and then now I'm like, oh well, now there's Butcher Babies and Bad Wolves and more like groove metal type bands and stuff like that. So
And
yeah.
I went kind of the same track that you did. I mean, a little bit earlier in my timeline, and then I hit college and went to like, for some odd reason, I went to like a 50s and 60s era kick for about a year, where I just listened to like um, Dean Martin and stuff like that, and then I hit like a lo-fi music kick for like the past 2 years now. I don't have a great reason why, but it's just relaxing and it helps because I'm like in law school now, so it's like very good study music, and I think that's where I'm just like, you know what, I think I just need to relax. Too stressed out.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for coming on. Where can we find you on social media?
Well, I have a wildly successful Twitter, which is at Blake underscore Allen 13. That is the basically one and only public place to find me. And I think you can attest to this. I don't exactly hide my opinions on things on there. So if your listeners want to hear a up and coming establishment shill talk about things on Twitter, they're more than welcome to disagree with me.
Yes, this is Joy Ann Reid's future body language inspector or whatever that was. That's the meme that we always keep talking about. Because
Yes.
that one time in the primary, the body language expert. That's it. That's
Yes.
that's what he is. He's Joy Ann Reid's future body language expert. He's going to be on her new primetime show in a
Okay.
few years, and it's going to be great. No, but yeah, thanks, man. I'll talk to
Yeah.
you later.
See you, Gregory.